The U.S. is the latest among many great powers to suffer a military defeat in Afghanistan. What happened?
The same thing that has been happening for thousands of years, starting from Alexander the Great to the Arab invaders, the British, Russians, and then Americans. It may seem deceptively easy to walk in, but it's very hard to get out.
One of the reasons it's easy to conquer Afghanistan is that the cities tend to be along the conquest routes. So you can just go along city to city, bang, 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 knock them off like dominoes. But
as the British commander told an Afghan warlord, basically read him the riot act and said, you better shape up or we are going to do this and that and the other thing to you. The Afghan warlord was smiling, and the British commander said, why are you smiling? And he said, well, I've been wondering, you have brought all these troops inside here. What are your plans about getting them out? And they were all killed, the last person.
When Alexander attacked, apparently his problem was not so much the Afghan people, but the weather and the terrain, right? That Alexander's troops went through an Afghan winter, which they apparently were not ready for.
A conqueror that really wanted to conquer and stay were the Arabs. And Arabs had a very, very difficult time. Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, in these areas, it took a couple of generations of warfare to subdue these areas and convert them. Very, very independent-minded, very, very warlike, and they don't like anybody to tell them what to do.
The impression that I got was that Afghanistan has never really had an identity as a country. That Ahmad Khan, who I guess was the father of modern Afghanistan, even he mostly just ruled in the cities, but up there in the mountains, they didn't care.
The idea is that you rule these tribal areas by consensus of the tribal leaders. So basically, wherever you have tribalism still, the central government rules with the consent of the tribal leaders. And the tribal leaders, when they are not happy, they're going to make a lot of trouble for the central government.
I haven't done homework on how the Muslims became so successful because as I understand it, even now, when Afghans do unite against an outsider, they tend to fight not so much for Afghanistan, but for Islam.
Especially against Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union attacked Afghanistan, it was very easy to organize all of these different tribal groups as mujahideen against the Soviet Union. So they kind of forgot about their divisions and they decided this was a jihad against the infidel foreigner. And that was a great way of organizing these groups. And Americans loved this. President Reagan loved this and invited these warlords to the White House and called them the equivalent of our founding fathers, if you believe that.
He even dedicated a launch of the Space Shuttle.
Just as the Columbia, we think, represents man's finest aspirations in the field of science and technology, so too does the struggle of the Afghan people represent man's highest aspirations for freedom. I am dedicating on behalf of the American people the March 22nd launch of the Columbia to the people of Afghanistan.
Very few of the great armies that went through Afghanistan were trying to conquer Afghanistan. They didn't really care. Alexander didn't want Afghanistan.
Right, and the British wanted to protect India.
Alexander just wanted to get to India. You mentioned Afghanistan has nothing. It's one of the most astonishingly poor, backwards countries you could possibly imagine. I read that the annual per capita income in Afghanistan is like $400, which is like a quarter of the income in Haiti. I mean, they're really poor. The literacy rate is like 28%.
It is unbelievable how happy these people are with how little. What takes to make these people happy is not material things, is togetherness, is being able to get together and chat and smoke and dance with a belly that is full and it doesn't take that much. So in a way, they are not into luxuries. And the lack of need and being able to live off the land makes them very, very difficult to conquer.
But in theory, the United States is the ultimate military power, the ultimate set of imperial rulers. How is it that whatever, 11 years, 12 years later, the U.S. is now negotiating with the Taliban and about to leave because they militarily just lost? What happened?
These small groups of warriors, tribal warriors, living and fighting off of their own territory, they have resources that empires can't match. And empires are deluded by their hubris, thinking that they can win. The Americans went there with another harmful sentiment, and that is anger. After 9/11, Americans were angry. And any strategist, any martial artist would tell you that two sentiments are very harmful to winning: fear and anger. So you go somewhere with anger, you are blinded.
Crucial to this is the role of my favorite desert kingdom, the Saudis.
The Saudis had been exporting their extremist kind of version of tribal Islam called Wahhabism for decades to Afghanistan. And Wahhabism being a kind of tribal desert version of Islam that detests civilized Islam, Islam that has adapted itself over the centuries to civilized life in the region, in the former Byzantine Empire, in the Arab world, or in the Persian Empire, or all over the world. This Wahhabi Islam detests that and rejects that. And this was a perfect match for these tribal areas where once the Saudis exported this extremism, it found a natural culture to grow in these areas. So extremist Islam and tribal mentality, which is blue, and definitely in the case of fighting Soviet Union, Americans helped the Afghans fight, but every American who went there knew and reported what great, brave warriors and what perfect soldiers the Afghans were.
President Individual One has picked up the phone and called Professor Ahmad Sadri and says, Professor Sadri, what should I do? Here it is, 2019. I have already announced that I'm going to get the hell out of here, but how can Afghanistan be helped in our absence? What do you say to him?
I would say that you should have called me. You have made a mess of things. Basically, the golden rule in American foreign policy should be what is good for us should be good for everybody else. If ruling the majority is protecting the minority, if liberal democracy is good for us, is national sovereignty is good for us, it should be good for everybody else. We should respect the will of the people. Even if the will of the people is to have an anti-American government in place, let them. What happened in Iran? In Iran, you had the most anti-American administration ever, anywhere in the world, conceivable, come to power 40 years ago. After 40 years, without having done anything, right? The Iranian population is enormously pro-American. Sometimes the best thing is to do nothing. If people want that kind of country, let them have it. And in time, they're going to realize the folly of their own ways.